The views and opinions expressed on Xplorers Secrets of the Truth or that of their guests or contributors are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. All information on Xplorers Secrets of the Truth is provided in good faith. However, we make no representation or warranty of any kind, express or implied, regarding the accuracy, adequacy, validity, reliability, availability, or completeness of any information on this talk show or website.
From monsters and ghosts to otherworldly beings, join the Explorers as they venture into the darkest realms, seeking the truth to what goes bump in the night.
Good evening, and welcome to Explorers, Seekers of the Truth, episode 74. Sit down, relax, shake off the normal world, and journey with us to the other realms of possibility. Tonight, as always, I'm joined by my best friend and co-host, Les Cabbage. Come with us as we explore and seek the truth about the other worlds.
Doom, doom, doom.
How are you doing this evening, Les?
Good, but you know what? I was kind of missing the little tune that you normally play behind that reading of yours.
Yeah, I want to get a longer version of that and use it instead of trying to speak so quickly.
Yeah. And you came in early. The video was still playing on my end, and all of a sudden you started talking behind it. I'm like, oh, technical difficulties, 1,001,000.
Well, it's weird because it actually played on my end this time and was over, and it was a black screen. That's why
it always stops early for you, but on my end it's still going through, and I don't know. One of these days it'll sync.
Yeah.
It will sync up. So much for paying more for my internet package. That's done us a load of good, didn't it?
Yeah.
But how you doing, buddy?
So
I mean, you had a pretty cool thing happen to you today at work. If you want to share that, because you shared it with me, with the pictures.
Oh yeah, the little puppy dog. Yeah, we were at work, and where I work is in the city, and our pest control guys were there, and they come in, they say, "Oh, do you guys know whose dog this is out here?" And there's this little like chocolate lab pit bull mix puppy, just standing there. So of course I go over and I bend down and the thing runs to me, and I put my hands out and it like jumped into my arms. I ended up carrying it until animal control showed up to take it to the shelter. I mean, it was a sweet little puppy. It was in really good shape, and the shelter we have is a no-kill, so
that's good.
They'll find its owner or find it a new home. And I have both my dogs are actually from that shelter group, and we have friends that work there, so they got to meet him. They said he's such a sweet little lovable boy.
Well, it looked like it from the pictures that you sent me. But Leslie and I have a bet going to see how fast you go back and pick that dog up.
No, it's not happening.
I don't know. The pictures of you holding that dog, buddy, you were in love. So
that's how I ended up with a red bone coonhound. Was I have one picture of me holding this dog, and next thing you know, it lives with me now.
Yeah, but that dog is awesome.
No, he's a good
boy. He's awesome. But otherwise, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, do you want me to do the normal spiel that we normally do?
That's actually what I was just going to ask you to do.
Well, look at that. We're reading each other's minds. So you can comment live here on Facebook or YouTube. We go live simultaneously on both of those social media outlets. Comment underneath the show, and we should be able to see that on our back end here live, and we could communicate with you guys. I don't know if we are live on either platform yet, because we don't have anything coming up that there's any viewers or anything joining us right now. And normally Cindy would say hello from YouTube. But if anybody out there can hear us, comment in the comment section so I know that it's coming through. Otherwise, we're probably going to have to restart the stream. But you could also find us on Twitter or X at Explorers Group. You can find us at our website, explorersgroup.com. Did you look on Facebook, Chad? Are we live? I can't hear you now.
I had the mute button on. I just commented on our Facebook, and it shows up. We have people watching, and people are commenting, and it's not showing up in my comment side over here on my interface. So
not on mine either. So I apologize, everybody. If you're trying to comment tonight, it doesn't look like it's going to be coming through. Big shocker there. Yeah. But anyways, comment throughout the show like you normally do, and we'll follow up later and get back to you guys. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll try to keep an eye on it as we're going. So, if I see anything pop up, I'll try to interject it into what we're doing.
Perfect. All right, that sounds good. So again, we apologize, but it wouldn't be our show without technical difficulties. But like I had mentioned before, Facebook, YouTube, we go live every other Tuesday. And you could also find us on any of the more popular podcast providers out there, Apple Podcast, Google Play, Amazon Music, the Spotify is what I actually host our show through for podcasts, not the live show, but the podcast. So check us out there. And while you're there, give us a 5-star review, please. It'll help boost us with the algorithms and all that crap. So, and like and subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Facebook so we can keep those algorithms going. All right, enough on that. And you want to tell everybody what we're going to be talking about tonight, bud?
Yes. So tonight we're going to be... sorry, I forget my desk bangs through my microphone. Mm-hmm. So tonight we're going to be talking about the curse of the Wendigo.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to break down what the Wendigo or Wendigo, there's actually 2 different ways of pronouncing it. There's actually several different ways, but that's the 2 we're going to stick with, is believed to be. We're going to talk about some of the lore, history, as well as talk about some, personal stories of people we know and stuff that we've experienced, and just kind of give you an idea of the Wendigo and all its folklore.
That's right. The Wendigo in all its glory. So as Chad said, we're going to break this down into a few different sections, and we're going to start off with the definition. The Canadian Encyclopedia.com defines the Wendigo, or Wendigo, as Chad said, is a supernatural being belonging to the spiritual traditions of Algonquin-speaking First Nations of North America. Wendigos are described as powerful monsters that have a desire to kill and eat their victims. In most legends, humans transform into Wendigos because of their greed or weakness. Various indigenous traditions consider Wendigos dangerous because of their thirst for blood and their ability to infect otherwise healthy people or communities with evil. So Wendigo legends are essentially cautionary tales about isolation and selfishness, and the importance of community. And according to most Algonquin oral traditions, a Wendigo is a cannibalistic monster that preys on the weak and socially disconnected. I'm a total candidate for becoming a Wendigo, if that's actually true. In most versions of the legend, a human becomes a Wendigo after his or her spirit is corrupted by greed or weakness, by extreme conditions such as hunger and cold. In other legends, humans become Wendigos when possessed by a prowling spirit during a moment of weakness, which is kind of interesting. Side note here, that's very reminiscent to a lot of attachments when people are in a certain lower state of mind, or you know what I mean, or in a state of weakness or depression or something like that. Spirits tend to attach themselves. So it's very similar here with the Wendigo situation. Yeah, but depending, go ahead.
Oh, what I was going to say is, I think, we look at it from a certain viewpoint, like westernized viewpoint, and we say like spirit attachments and stuff like this, demons, whatever you want to consider. This is basically, to me, just another name from another
Yeah.
culture
Yeah.
that describes the same things that, in a more westernized culture are going to call demons. Well, if you
Yeah.
take what you said about the Wendigo, it's really some form of like not demonic in the sense of the devil, but some kind of evil entity that corrupts the human soul.
Yeah. Yeah. All a supernatural basis, just
Yeah,
different
vernacular.
culture. Yeah. And culture. Yeah, absolutely. So that I think is pretty interesting. So it's very much along the same path as other kind of paranormal or supernatural superstitions or beliefs. So depending on the many First Nations that speak an Algonquin language, including the Abenaki, Siksika, Mi'kmaq, Algonquin, Ojibwe, and Innu, the spelling and pronunciation of the word Wendigo differs, as Chad had mentioned earlier, with alternative versions of the same term. Their names, such as Achin, Chenchu, and Kiwak, are also commonly used to refer to the Wendigo. The Algonquin legend describes the creature as a giant with a heart of ice. Sometimes it's thought to be entirely made of ice. Its body is skeletal and deformed, with missing lips and toes, which I guess would kind of go with the whole frozen ice thing. Is, when you get frostbite and stuff like that, you tend to lose the outermost extremities, or the most vulnerable extremities, like lips, fingers, and toes. Now, the Ojibwa description: it was a large creature as tall as a tree, with a lipless mouth and jagged teeth. Its breath was a strange hiss, its footprints full of blood, and it ate any man, woman, or child who ventured into its territory. And those were the lucky ones. Sometimes the Wendigo chose to possess a person instead, and then the luckless individual became a Wendigo himself, hunting down those he had once loved and feasted upon their flesh.
Yeah.
Pretty nice.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, right.
So, like Les was saying, just as there is different versions of the word Wendigo.
Wendigo.
There's many variations of the creature's appearance and the powers attributed it. So sometimes they're described as exceptionally thin, with skull and skeleton pushing through its ash-colored mummy-like skin. Now, other stories also describe the Wendigo as a well-fleshed giant who gets proportionately larger the more it eats. Now, a third version of the legends has pointed or animal-like ears with antlers or horns sprouting on its head. The Wendigo's eyes have been described as sunken or glowing like hot coals. And of course, it has sharp, pointy teeth and extremely bad breath and body odor. And often that's one of the traits, with people who have claimed to see him, is the smell, which again, you start thinking stuff like that. You also start going into like Bigfoot and other, woodland cryptids that are attributed smells. But now you got to also imagine something that's eating flesh is probably not brushing its teeth.
And it's rotting itself, and the description that you gave is pretty much spot on to what we put in our banner for the show, with the antlers, the glowing eyes, and the mummy, emaciated body and stuff like that. That's why we decided to go with that one, because there were many variations of the Wendigo out there, but I thought that one was the best.
Now, some of the powers that are attributed to, but not always, is such things as like superhuman strength and stamina that allows it to stalk, overpower, and devour its victims. And the Wendigo are usually credited with exceptional eyesight, hearing, and sense of smell. They're said to move with the speed of the wind and the ability to walk across deep snow or even over open water without sinking. So different versions of the Wendigo legend say different things about its speed and agility. Some claim it is unusually fast and can endure walks for long periods of time, even in the harsh winter conditions. Now, of course, then there's the counter of all that is others say it's a more haggard manner that it walks in as it kind of is falling apart almost in that zombie-esque, rotting tissue end of it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well,
go
ahead. Sorry, I jumped in there.
Oh, I was going to say, if you think about it, like if it is this supernatural creature, speed wouldn't necessarily be a skill for something of that sort. Like it wouldn't have to be faster than you.
Right.
It's going to stalk you in the cold and the snow, and it's going to basically run you until you get tired.
Right.
It doesn't have
That's
to
what I
be
was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially in the snow and stuff like that, it's going to let you exhaust yourself before, it's just going to make it that much easier for it to take you over and consume you.
And here's one of the things: once it infiltrates the human mind, it can turn them into a Wendigo as well, instilling upon them the same lust for human flesh that itself has. So it's also, the way I kind of thought of it was, it almost has a psychic connection to its victim, even before the fact. So even if it is, if it's the old, horror movie lumbering behind you, Jason, and all of a sudden you trip and fall and he's in front of you.
Yep.
It develops this connection with its victims, because I'm sure it's much like we were saying, like in the sense of like a demon or an evil entity, it's attaching itself slowly as the conditions worsen and your fear increases and you're not trusting, or you become greedy of the food that you have left. So it's starting to just slowly infiltrate into your brain. And then once it's kind of in there, it kind of knows where you're going and is going to be there waiting for you when you get there.
Yeah, because it's going to push the fear level so high that it knows you're just going to start making big mistakes. And it's just going to be, like you said before, just sitting and waiting, you know what I mean, for you to make that fatal mistake, and you're done. You're done.
Now, when it comes to the human that the Wendigo overtakes and takes over, a lot of the cultures believe that the human personality continues to reside within the Wendigo, specifically in where the heart should be.
Okay.
But this person is frozen, and one of the things they attribute is a frozen heart in some of the cultures. So the person is actually in where the heart should be, but is frozen in there. And they say the only way to kill the Wendigo is to kill the human within it as well.
Yeah.
So, it kind of, a lot of the folklore tie together, even from different cultures that have different representations of it. They seem to tie it back to this frozen heart, evil, but yet the human is still in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And, a few of the legends even state that the frozen person can successfully be rescued from inside the creature. In most cases, however, the death is the only way to free the person.
Right. Well, I wonder if that's kind of where the saying, cold-hearted, you know what I mean, comes from, where you say, oh, somebody, they're cold-hearted, and, they're just evil. There's no warmth or love in them anymore. They're just cold. You know what I mean? Like,
I wonder that often.
It's a perfect correlation.
Yeah, I wonder that. Yeah.
And the other thing too, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I also wonder if in some other cultures that use that phrasing, that there's not something similar entity-wise that is kind of the root back to the cold heart.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense now. After you read that out aloud, I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's where that saying comes from. Because normally a lot of common phrases or sayings have some sort of old world meaning or root to it. Like, what is it? Ring Around the Rosie. The song was, you know what I mean, is about the plague and all that stuff. So, you think it's this innocent thing, but it's not. Are you still there? Because you're freezing up on my side.
Yeah. Now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
I'm watching our
Okay.
bar, like our signal bar, and it keeps crashing. So I hope we make it.
Yeah, I see it too. Now, yeah, according to some of the legends, the Wendigo can be killed with conventional weapons such as a club or firearm. Other legends claim that the Wendigo has to be somehow subdued and its icy heart cut out and then melted over a roaring fire. And still, other legends claim that only a knowledgeable First Nation spiritual leader or shaman can dispatch the Wendigo with a specific spell or ceremony.
Interesting. One of the other characteristics that I wanted to point out on the Wendigo too is it uses familiar sounds or voices to lure people either into the forest or into the dark or away from whatever safety is around them. So I think it plays along with that, getting into the psyche or getting into the mind, maybe not necessarily possessing the person as like a demonic possession or spirit, ghost possession, for lack of better terms. But it's more like you were saying before, like getting into the fear of somebody and you using something familiar to confuse and lure, and then you let the fear set in, then you get confused, then you get disoriented, then you are just more or less a toy to be played with, and then the victim.
Yeah, especially in a lot of the attributing thought processes, it's during times of harsh conditions. So, that sound of a deer when you're starving and you're a hunter and you hear those deer running and you think, oh, I can get one of those and we'll have food.
Yep.
So all of a sudden you start going out there, and then maybe while you're out there you hear your cousin call your name further out, and you're like, oh, well, maybe he got a deer, so we got to go to him.
Yep.
So it keeps drawing you further away from further away from your
safety.
base and your reality. Yeah.
It makes that makes perfect sense. Excuse me, in this situation. Now we're going to jump into the origin and history of the Wendigo. So the tbsnews.com states as the tale goes, the first ever Wendigo was once a lost hunter. During a brutally cold winter, the man's intense hunger drove him to cannibalism. After feasting on another human's flesh, he transformed into a crazed man-beast roaming the forest in search for more people to eat. In another version of the story, the first Wendigo is said to have been a warrior who made a deal with the devil in order to save his tribe. He gave up his soul and was transformed into a Wendigo. The peace ensued. There was no need for such a fearsome creature, and the warrior was banished from his tribe and forced to live as an outcast. So, little bit different than some of the other things that we said in the characteristics and whatnot, but kind of the same. It has to do with the cannibalism and the eating of human flesh and, banishment. So.
Yeah. And I actually kind of remember, I think one of the first times I've ever heard of the Wendigo was the warrior story.
Yeah.
Where, it made, this deal and then transformed, and once it was no longer useful, it kind of got ostracized, and then it lived out on the outskirts of the area where his village was, and he was always kind of the monster in the woods at that point.
Yeah.
So I just remember that kind of, you know, and you could probably draw some correlations and other stories that are similar to that. When you go into like the Viking culture and stuff like that, you have not just the berserkers, but you also have like Michael Crichton wrote the book, the People Eaters of the Dead,
Mm-hmm.
13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas.
Yep.
And that was these creature people that were living out, because they had basically been ostracized from the main culture for their beliefs and practices. Now, one of the first European written accounts of the Wendigo was by Paul Lejeune, a Jesuit missionary who lived among the Algonquin in the early 17th century in what is now Quebec. How about the Quebec pizza? The Pop-Tart with the ketchup. I love the Love Guru. I don't care what anybody says.
I agree. I thought they say it was Mike Myers' downfall, but I thought that movie was fantastic.
Yeah. So, in this report to his superiors in Paris in 1636, Lejeune wrote, the devilish woman added that the Wendigo had eaten some of the Atamaquin. These are a tribe that live north of the river that is called the Three Rivers, and that he would eat a great many more of them if they were not called elsewhere. But that Achu, a sort of werewolf type creature, would come in his place to devour them, ending even up to the French fort he would slaughter the French themselves.
Interesting. Well, let me interject here, brother. For those who may be just tuning in, we want to remind you all that we go live every other Tuesday on Facebook and YouTube. There you can comment live in our instant feedback section. Other than tonight, we normally get the comments and respond live. Tonight is an exception because it's not freaking working. And while you're there, please give us a follow on Facebook, a like and subscribe on YouTube. This helps boost us within the algorithm and help our rankings. And for those on the go who like to catch the show at a later time, we're on all the major podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon Music, etc., etc. And again, while you're there, please give us a 5-star review on the platform of your choice. Now, back to the show. So, as Chad was saying, he was talking about a Jesuit missionary, Paul Lejeune. Another Jesuit relations document stated that what caused us greater concern was the intelligence that met us upon entering the lake, namely that the men deputed by the conductor to summon the nations of the North Sea and assigning them a rendezvous where they were to await our coming, had met their death the previous winter in a very strange manner. These poor men, according to the report given to us, were seized with an ailment unknown but very unusual among the people we're seeking. They are afflicted with their lunacy, hypochondria, they were afflicted with neither lunacy, hypochondria, or frenzy, but have a combination of all these species of disease, which affects their imaginations and causes them more than canine hunger. This makes them so ravenous for human flesh that they pounce upon women, children, and even upon men like veritable werewolves and devour them voraciously without being able to appease their glut their appetite. Ever seeking fresh prey, and the more greedily, the more they eat, this ailment attacked our deputies, and as death is the sole remedy amongst those simple people for checking such acts of murder, they were slain in order to stay the course of their madness. So I find it interesting that they're attributing the Wendigo, what do you want to call it, characteristics or whatever, to werewolf type disease or creature, whatever. I don't know.
Well, I think that it kind of goes back to what we had, when we had started the show, we kind of said it's almost one of those things like when you look at it from a Western westernized point of view or easternized non-Native American point of view, or
Right.
two comparative cultures. We're using our European ancestry and saying, oh, this, and this is a werewolf.
Right.
And then you come and you talk to First Nations people, and you basically describe the case, and they say, oh, that's a Wendigo.
Right.
It's just this maybe similar things, maybe appearance is different, but then again, if you go to any werewolf story from Germany, France,
Yeah.
any different parts of Europe, you're going to hear different descriptions, like, oh, it was taller than a man, it was the height of a man, it was actually shorter, but it was it was hunched down, it was standing upright, its knees were bent the wrong way.
Yep.
So there might just be different the different words, or the interpretation might only give you certain words to use.
Right.
So like werewolf might be the most closest thing an early European would have had to describe what these people were acting like. Because remember, also in early or in European history, werewolf didn't always have hair. It wasn't like a werewolf like we think of a movie werewolf. It was somebody who was acting wolf-like.
Right.
Attacking people, biting them, scratching them, acting like a wolf, howling at the moon. So take away the Hollywood, Lon Chaney, hairy man, Benicio del Toro, which was a great Wolfman movie.
Oh, yeah.
Take away, or even American Werewolf in Paris or American Werewolf in London with the transformation or the howling, but take it as a person who's is presenting those attributes of a wolf, and then take it to a different culture and it becomes the Wendigo.
Yeah, same mental illness, different monster tagged to it.
Yeah, different different word attributed to it, and then when you're taking it from one culture to another culture, you only have a certain word to use, and maybe werewolf was the closest thing that they could attribute it to. In you're sending letters back to Paris, you're not going to say the Wendigo,
right? Because everybody, what the hell is that?
Yeah, you might say the Wendigo, which is very similar to our werewolf.
Yeah, right.
To people attributed those factors. Now, the thing is, in the early 20th century, the term Wendigo actually finds its way into Western medical vocabulary. And it's used by early psychiatrists to refer to a mental condition in which patients felt possessed by a cannibalistic desire. And, a missionary by the name of J.E. Sandon was one of the first to use the term in the 1920s while working with the Cree community in Western James Bay area. There he met a woman who claimed that she saw strangers who wanted to kill and devour her. And he referred to the woman's mental condition as a psychoneuroses, a mental or behavioral disorder characterized by depression and anxiety. Oftentimes, the condition came to be known as the Wendigo psychoses.
Okay.
Now, for years, and of course, as the medical terminology and understandings change, it's become very debated if it's a real condition.
Yeah.
So I actually went and looked up some stuff from the National Library of Medicine.
I love that you do that, buddy.
And believe it or not, they still have a very large library of information on this. They
Really?
yeah, they really look you know, of course one research paper I was looking at was, you know, it wasn't trying to prove that this was, but it was giving you the, you know, characteristics of what people were showing and, you know, presenting. And even I'm going to actually have a couple of actual cases that we're going to, you know, kind of put into this. So when a individual experiences the Wendigo psychoses, they exhibit a range of symptoms, including paranoia, anxiety, hallucinations, and cannibalistic urges.
That's
Okay.
just freaking crazy.
Now, typically, the onset of the psychoses is marked by depression, nausea, and anorexia.
Hmm.
Okay. As this disorder advances, individuals become to believe that they are possessed by the Wendigo, leading to a heightened level of paranoia and violent hallucinations of potential victims in the form of animals to be killed and devoured. Further along, the afflicted may develop an alarming shift in perception, viewing others, even close family members, as potential prey.
Jesus.
Then, once the flesh is actually consumed, the transformation is considered complete and irreversible.
Good Lord.
So, you have, again, you look at some of these presenting issues, you know, depression, nausea, anorexia. But, you know, you're getting into the, you know, paranoia, anxiety, hallucinations, and these urges, right?
Yeah.
So another version of this I had heard about, and I couldn't, it does kind of cover a little bit in this case, some of the case studies, is that this psychosis is that people that have eaten human flesh develop an insatiable craving for human flesh to the point where they will eat, like, even when they get steak or any kind of red meat, they'll eat it next to raw because they can't stand it being cooked.
Jesus.
And when they do this, they're basically, even if they eat, like, say they eat a 72-ounce steak and they're 120 pounds, they'll still be hungry because they haven't eaten human flesh. So they actually become possessed with the idea of they can stave off the craving. It's like, you know, chewing Nicorette gum when you're trying to quit smoking. You can stave off the craving for a while, but eventually a lot of people, they relapse into that and, you know, they light up a cigarette and they start smoking again. Well, this is, you know, not very much the same, but similar thought processes. They can eat, you know, raw or rawish meat for a while to stave off the cravings, but the whole time in their head, it's still, I'm hungry, I have not eaten.
God almighty.
Yeah. So
I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be in that position where you can't feel, you know, full by any means or satisfied unless you consume human flesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's like any other psychosis. At that point, like, you can't ever win that battle.
Right.
Like,
not without any kind of like medical or.
Well, I think even with medical, without the person wanting to get help or understanding that they have an issue, like, it's not real, you don't need to do this.
Yeah.
I don't think you can fix it. Like, you can drug them,
Yeah.
but you're not actually fixing or helping with the psychological issues of it.
Jeez.
Now, you know, so I think a lot of it is truly a mental disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the folklore from the Wendigo is way into this, hey, there's got to be a psychological condition for these people.
Mm-hmm.
So now here's one of the things: the prevalence rate of this type of psychoses, it's not very clear. Now, some sources have reported that there have been as many as 70 cases in the 1960s.
Jesus.
It's not known for sure whether the Wendigo psychoses should be considered a mental illness or just a result of certain cultural beliefs and behaviors. So it's one of those things where it could be an actual mental illness. Like
Right.
people, you know, develop this thought process of, oh, I need to eat this. I need to have it. I need to consume it. And it just becomes a fixation that they constantly are doing it. Or it's a cultural thing where they have some mental issues and then the cultural reference history and folklore are used to kind of create this narrative that, oh, you're possessed by the Wendigo.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like lycanthropy with werewolves. Like, is it is a mental condition, but is it brought on by the thought process of, oh, you were bit by something, you're going to turn into that monster in the woods at night on a full moon when the wolfbane's blooming? You know, so is it a culturally pushed thing? And now, you know, of course, with the mythology of the Algonquin speaking tribes, particularly those in the northern regions of North America, this phenomenon is marked by an overwhelming belief and delusion that individuals are transformed into the Wendigos, malevolent spirits driven by the insatiable desire to eat flesh.
Hmm.
Now, again, too, like you had mentioned earlier, a lot of the mythology and the folklore of this reflects times of famine, hardship endured by those communities,
Right.
making it a powerful narrative that continues to influence these people psychologically, even to these current days in those communities.
Right.
You know, so again, it could be a psychological condition, or it could be some kind of cultural mechanism and belief system that, you know, because at times people do have to resort to cannibalism to survive.
Right.
So is, you know, the Donner Party, the movie Alive, the
Yep.
soccer
The soccer
rugby,
team.
yeah,
Yeah.
in the Andes, and some of these, you know, Native American stories of people who during these harsh winters kind of broke down to the only option was eating the sick or the, you know, older member of the family, or maybe even a child.
Yeah.
So maybe to discourage it down the road, people heighten the folklore behind it to kind of say, like, hey, you shouldn't do that. And there are, now here's the thing, there are things that you can get from eating human flesh.
Mm-hmm.
There's buildups of Peyronie's, I think, that can happen. I believe it's in like the brain and will actually cause you issues and will eventually kill you.
Is that like mad cow disease?
I'm not 100% sure. It might be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pulling 3 or 4 different things together as I think about that, and I'm not sure what all the sources for it are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so is it like a, hey, our people had to do this? But also think about the psychological effect of
Mm-hmm.
like you're trapped in, you know, the Great Lakes region in the middle of winter,
Mm-hmm.
and there's say 6 of you. and one of them, one of the 6 falls asleep and doesn't wake up, but you're all starving, and the next morning the other 5 of you wake up, and you look at that person who's not waking up and go, "Ooh, the only way for us to survive is to do this."
Right.
It's the perfect source of nutrients for you for a short-term fix. So, you kind of had to do it, but then you survive all this. Say, out of that 6 people, 1 passed away, 5 of you ate them, 4 of you survive it. You come out the other side, and first of all, what are your people going to look at you like? The family
A monster.
Yeah, the family members of the people that you had to eat to survive are going to say, why did you survive and they didn't?
Right.
You're a monster. Then you're getting all that outside pressure and influence on your psyche that you're turning around and then thinking, I'm maybe really am a monster.
Right. Right.
You have survivor's guilt at that point. Like, why did I live and that person die?
True. That's a good point.
Then all of a sudden you become ostracized by your group.
And yourself.
And then you become that warrior who had to stay outside, who had to get away from it, was pushed out of the tribe and was always on the periphery of the society, but was always then that scary man, that monster.
Right.
That plus,
what's that?
You just walked over my Wendigo.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I already did it. It was in that chorus, and you're that man, that monster, that Wendigo.
Ah, yes. I'm sorry, buddy. I didn't mean to stomp on your Wendigo. But
you stomped on my Wendigo, and it hurt a lot.
I know. They got a throbbing Wendigo. But it's kind of like that when you're alone too. You're driven into that madness, and you start almost like Tom Hanks in Castaway, where he was talking to the volleyball and stuff.
Volleyball.
Yeah, Wilson.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that same concept too, where maybe you get driven to that point of madness at that point, and you are that monster because that's the last cognitive thing you had. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like, well, now I am.
Yeah. And now you have this, I am this monster, and now what made me the monster?
Right.
Eating that. So now it's almost self-fulfilling prophecy that you want to feed the beast within.
Yep, exactly.
So
exactly.
Now, like I said, I do have a couple of cases that were presented as part of the information. There is, here's an interesting one, the use of self-cannibalism to gain power has also been documented in cases. Okay. So there was a 29-year-old homeless man. The individual was admitted to the hospital after trying to consume his own fingers, a gesture aimed at demonstrating his psychological dominance and distinctive nature and to discourage potential harm from others.
Jesus Christ.
So basically, it was a very big power play.
Yeah.
Like, you think you're going to hurt me, I'll bite off my own finger in front of you. Like, nothing's going to hurt me. So that is one case of it. And, again, it's a homeless person. What mental state, what mental or psychoses or whatever drove them to be homeless? Not that all the homeless people are, but a large majority of homeless people have mental health issues.
Yeah, or drug addictions.
Yeah. So, and drug addiction can also bring on mental health issues, which again puts a person in those, depressed, anxiety, paranoia states.
Well, remember the bath salts guy that ate the face off of the other person down in Florida?
Yep. Now, so you have stuff like that. And, like an individual there is kind of creating a psychological buffer that shields them from the full weight of their actions. Like they're making this grand gesture of power to
Mhm.
kind of buffer themselves and to kind of not have to mentally deal with their situation.
Right, right.
You know. So, in another case, is one that is a 38-year-old man with a 3-year history of paranoia and schizophrenia after a period of poor medical compliance and methamphetamine use. Experienced intensified, psychoses, including intense preoccupation with numbers and delusions of influence.
Hmm.
The patient proceeded to sever and consume his left and right small toes over the span of 3 weeks. Despite the
Jesus.
severity of the patient's actions, he was returned to work after the reinstatement of drugs. They give an actual the clinical names and the dosages. I don't think we need
Flup and
that part of it.
Fixel? Is it Flup and
Flup.
Fixel?
Fluff, yeah, whatever. And olazepam. I mean, guys, it's 20 milligrams and 5 milligrams if you really need to know the dosages. But they're antipsychotics used to balance out and stabilize his condition. So here's a person who basically the drug use and poor medical health intensified his psychoses,
Yeah.
where he's already a paranoid schizophrenic, and he ended up self-mutilating and consuming that flesh.
My God.
Another story. I just love digging up these grotesque medical stories. A similar report discussed a 43-year-old convict admitted to the psychiatric evaluation due to a self-inflicted removal and consumption of abdominal tissue.
Oh, God.
Unlike the other 2 reports, the patient was hostile, irritable, and had severe delusions of persecution, which only subsided after a course of 10 electroconvulsive therapy sessions.
Jesus mighty.
So here's one where the guy is actually aggressive and hostile, kind of more fitting into the Wendigo psychoses.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So I was, going through all this medical case history and stuff like that. And I don't know if you remember Zach Bowen and Addie Hall. They became famous as one of the couples that waited out Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. They were all over the news because they were some of the few people that actually stayed like in the French Quarter during the storm, after the storm. They were the people that were like, you'd see the group of people outside eating like on the street. They were eating from like a picnic table, and it would be him and her.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Zach, basically they actually became featured on Haunted History. I think it was season 1, episode 8.
Yep.
Called the Katrina Cannibals or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically what happened was Zach and Addie, Zach was ex-military, had some psychological issues. Addie was a bohemian artist who also had psychological and drug issues. Mm-hmm. They moved into the Voodoo Spiritual Temple on Rampart Street in New Orleans shortly after Hurricane Katrina. Well, within weeks, Zach murdered Addie, choked her to death, then proceeded to dismember her, putting parts of her in the oven, on the stove, in the fridge, in saucepans, and basically was planning on now. And of course, there's different which source you look at says he did consume some of her flesh. Some sources say he didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure because some of them cite, the coroner's report says he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And another one say, there were bite marks in the flesh that was on the stove. Again, I don't know for sure, but if you start to think about it, you have things like the Lugaroo
Right.
in New Orleans and in that part of the country. And a lot of times the Lugaroo type stuff is similar to werewolf type stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's very similar to lycanthropy and the Wendigo.
The Wendigo, okay? So now he, like I said, had mental issues. He was he did most likely suffered from PTSD from being in the military.
Right.
He had served in the first Iraq War and over in Kosovo. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people that knew him very well knew that he had befriended a young boy in Kosovo, and the boy was killed very close to him. I don't know if the boy was shot or blown up or something like that, but he was very close when it happened. Also, being in the military, explosions, stuff like that, he possibly could have had a traumatic brain injury.
Yeah.
Okay. So he ends up killing and dismembering her. And like I said, certain accounts say he did consume flesh, others don't. But one of the weird things he did do was he took her journals after he killed her and wrote in them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read a couple excerpts from the journals. Today is Monday, 16th October, 2 a.m. I killed her at 1 a.m. Thursday, 5 October. I very calmly strangled her. It was very quick. Halfway through the task, I stopped and thought about what I was doing. The decision to halt the first idea and move to plan B, the crime scene you are now in, came after a while. I scared myself not by the actions of calmly strangling the woman I loved for 1.5 years and then desecrating her body, but my entire lack of remorse. I've known forever how horrible of a person I am. Ask anyone, and decided to quit my job, spend the $1,500 cash I had been happy in. Hold on. I spent the $1,500 cash I had being happy until I killed myself. So that's what I did. Good food, good drugs, good strippers, good friends, and any loose ends I may have had. I didn't contact any of my family, so that'll explain the shock. And had a fantastic time living out my last days. It is just about time now.
Jesus Christ.
So I'm not saying this is necessarily, and I don't know if it's ever clinically been researched as part of the Wendigo psychoses, but here's somebody who did have paranoia, anxiety, depression issues.
Yeah.
Who then goes to like he even says in his note, it's the complete lack of remorse.
Right.
Like he was just driven to do it and didn't feel bad about what he did. Like there was no human instinct left.
Yeah.
So one of the weird things about all this is there was a woman, Margaret Sanchez, who appeared in all the footage, television shows, documentaries. I think they made a documentary about Zach and Addie. An episode of Haunted History she also appeared in. And her name was Margaret Sanchez. And, you know, she was always tearful and devastated by the loss of her best friends and, you know, all this. And she's always the one they went to because she was probably the closest to the two of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So the weird thing is here, she pled guilty and subsequently was convicted in 2012 of the death and dismemberment of Jaron Lockhart, a Bourbon Street dancer and young mother.
Jesus.
So her and her fiance, boyfriend, husband, something like that, who was a convicted sex offender from North Carolina who had made his way to New Orleans, got with this woman who was friends with Zach and Addie and was the go-to person. They together killed and dismembered this young lady.
Hmm.
And they were caught. I think he's doing like 40 years or she's doing 40 years. And one of them's doing life without parole, double life. And one of them's doing 40 years. Jeez. But again, here are people so closely related. You know, like best friends who one of them goes to this crazy extreme of not only just murdering his girlfriend, but then journals about it, talks about the lack of remorse, dismembers her in the sense of going to cook her up. Now, some of the theories was that he was going to use the cooking process to separate the meat from the bones to make it easier to dispose of. The lady, this Margaret Sanchez, they killed this young lady, dismembered her, and then were throwing her around the city.
Jeez.
So is this a case possibly of a shared psychoses?
Well, you know, it very well could be, because if they were all stranded together in New Orleans during the time of the hurricane, there weren't anybody else. It was just this small, concentrated group of people. It could very well have been a shared psychoses, or just because they were such a small group in a large area that was basically abandoned, they were potentially losing their minds. I mean, just think about after the hurricane swept through, what kind of filth was left behind. I mean, could it have been some sort of a disease, or could it have been, I mean, think about New Orleans and stuff. There's a lot of voodoo, hoodoo, vampire, you know.
Yeah.
Could this have been some sort of a cult thing?
Well, and that's the thing. When you think about it, the murder of Addie takes place above the voodoo temple. Now, other people that have lived there over the years have had weird paranormal experiences.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not saying this is necessarily the Wendigo psychoses, but it is very animalistic.
Right. It hits a lot of check marks.
Of consuming human flesh. Yeah. So I kind of, when I was reviewing the, you know, medical stuff on it, I was like, that reminds me of that case in New Orleans where they, you know, I mean, he ended up jumping off a building and landing on a car and had the suicide note in his pocket with the address and the keys to the apartment. Now, since then, the apartment, the building in 2016 caught fire and most of it was destroyed. And the voodoo temple has moved down the road now a little ways. But, you know, it's actually on one of the, I think it's on a National Historical Landmark. I think it's 826 Rampart in New Orleans is a National Historical Monument. And it's the actual building where he chopped her up and put her in the oven.
I just hopped on a Facebook really quick, and Jason Stewart says, and I don't know if he's talking about the people we were just talking about, Margaret, or the guy who killed Addie. He says it's Kuru or Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, a prion illness from eating the central nervous system.
That, I think that was actually when I said about there's things from eating humans that the prions,
like we were saying about mad cow or whatever. So yeah, that's probably what the proper term is.
Yeah. Like I said, I was drawn from 3 different things and just trying to pull something together that made sense.
Right.
But I just remember there was something in eating something in the human body that can cause this buildup of prions. And
Oh yeah, absolutely.
causes issues.
Yeah, I always thought it was called mad cow. What the hell is mad cow disease then? Isn't it? I thought it was like when you're feeding like cow remains to cows or whatever, and they get mad cow disease.
It's bovine spongiform encephalitis, commonly known as mad cow disease. Sorry, I looked it up as you were talking.
That's all right. That's all right. I always thought that that's what it was. Is when they consumed parts of other cows, they developed this.
The variant of the Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease is the mad cow infected beef if it is eaten by humans. So, yeah, I guess it's similar. Yeah, because it's like a type of prion that causes it.
Mm-hmm.
Prion, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's similar along those lines. I think the same type of issue, not necessarily the exact same, but similar.
Yeah. Interesting. So now we're going to move on to personal stories from either ourselves or people that we have spoken to personally. And one that I want to bring up is somebody that I know, and they reached out to me, and I'm just going to read verbatim the conversation that I had with this husband and wife that I know. They reached out. They said, "Hey, I hope I'm not going to bother you with this, but you're the only one around that I know of that specializes in these things." Or I guess you should say that I'm interested. I don't know how much I'm specialized, but he goes on to say, like, nothing like this has ever happened before, but it's now occurred twice this week. Neither event I was present for. My wife and oldest daughter were down at the barn earlier this week. While alone, they both heard their names, and this is, again, the interesting part. They both heard their names being called by the other person. However, it was in a direction that person was not in. So the night before, his wife, they had their window open, and since it was so nice out, and we heard animalistic noises that just didn't make sense. There were screams, but the dogs didn't bark or wake up. Now, you got to keep in mind, they do have a farm. They have livestock guardian dogs, which are outside with, the livestock, obviously. And none of these dogs responded. So they went outside and they didn't see anything. Then the morning that, I guess it was the morning that my friend was telling me this story, when his wife went to feed the animals, she came up terrified because she said she saw what appeared to be a sheep in the middle of the field, walking on hind legs, looking at her. But she continued to take care of the animals. Once she got into the barn, she heard the door slam repeatedly, but after looking at it, it was right where she left it. He proceeds to say that, I know skinwalkers are a southwestern cryptid, but I'm not sure what else this would line up with. So my response to him was, to me, this sounds exactly like a Wendigo. They use human voices to lure people out and can change shape, which is one of the things we didn't mention, is some of the many, many definitions of the Wendigo and characteristics of the Wendigo that we had, researched. Shape-shifting, kind of like the skinwalker is a shapeshifter. Same thing with the Wendigo. It could go between people and this creature and so on and so forth. So they're very well known in the indigenous oral history all throughout the U.S. Then there is the sheep squatch, which is totally unrelated to the Wendigo, but kind of related to this personal story, which I believe originated in West Virginia. But I don't know, for those, it's reported throughout the Appalachian mountain range. So those of you who don't know what sheep squatch is, it is pretty much exactly as it sounds. It's a Bigfoot-like creature, but it has like curly hair, horns like a ram, and like a sheepish face.
That would just be the cutest Sasquatch ever.
Oh, I know, wouldn't it? So a few days later, I spoke with his wife, and she shared her story with me, and I quoted from the story that I just read before. But she also said that when she saw this sheep, I'm just going to call it sheep squatch. When she saw this sheep squatch out in the pasture, I guess at first, and I'm trying to not screw this up because we were talking about it. It wasn't what that part wasn't written down. I guess it was down on the ground initially, which is what made her think it was a sheep. Then she said, as she was walking past and kind of looking at it, it stood up and just kind of swayed side to side, but didn't take its eyes off her. And then she hurried into the barn. And like I said before, when she got in, the door was slamming and stuff like that. So she said to me that her daughter reminded her that a few months ago, around the full moon, there was something else standing between the trees. I used to live across the street from their farm, and it was in the driveway of the place that I used to live on. And it was almost as tall as the fence that was around the crops that were in the field up there, and they had to be at least 10 feet tall. So whatever they saw was as tall as this fence that is keeping deer out of the crops. So I asked her if it was the same creature that was in the pasture, to which she stated no. Completely different. It was no visible horns, not as slim. It was bulkier. It was during the night. The dog was going crazy. She went down to the barn to see what was going on, and she saw it on the way back up from the barn in her headlights. She said that didn't really freak her out, and she's used to seeing figure-like things around. Usually I just say it's a tree or something, and then she's fine. The calling of her name and what she saw in the pasture is what really freaked her out. So then I said back to her, first and foremost, she is extremely brave, because I think if I saw sheep squatch in my field with, my animals, and this had to been 50 to 75 yards away from her, so it wasn't terribly far, right? Close enough to get a very good look at the thing. I don't think I could just be like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna keep going about my business, go in the barn and do what I need to. No, I'd have fucking taken off. No way. I wouldn't have been as poised and controlled as she was. I'd been like, fuck this, I'm gone. So I said that it was funny that she mentioned these figures, because I told her the story of my old landlord when I lived across the street from him. He had told me a story, I guess back in, and we talk about this story too in one of our past episodes. It was called Sasquatch on the Farm. So he told me that back in the day when he was in college, he and a few buddies were camping in an old shack that was down near the ponds behind the house that I lived in. And again, it's the neighboring property from where the sheep squatch was. So they were hanging out, just drinking beer, eating cheesesteaks and stuff like that. And it was raining out. So one of the dudes went out to take a pee, and he said when he was doing his deed, I guess a flash of lightning had flashed, and he saw a huge figure standing in front of him in the trees. He ran back in, and the next day they said they saw a bunch of branches that were broken in a line as if it ran out in a certain direction. They didn't go looking for it. They didn't see anything else other than these broken branches. So it's funny that she mentions these figures that she would see up by the driveway, and then there was another correlating story. I've also had a few other people that lived in the neighboring area. Like, this valley has a lot of weird shit that would go on. I mean, you were there. We've had our own experiences that we've talked about before. It's the same episode of Sasquatch on the Farm. I don't know. During the day, it is the most gorgeous place you'd want to see. Like, it's just like the walking trails, the forest, everything's gorgeous. The minute the sun goes down, that place takes on an incredibly ominous presence, like just a weird sensation. God, I'll get into another story as once I finish this story that my friends had gone through, but it's just I don't know. It's like almost like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing, but with a property. So then she goes on to say, I can't exactly identify what it is, just a figure. Could I claim Sasquatch? Of course. I could definitely make it fit the typical description of a Sasquatch, but who knows what it is? It's something. You could feel it watching you, but it doesn't seem mean or nasty if you understand what I mean. Kind of like if you let it be, it'll let you be. But the most recent incident, again, she states, was completely different and felt completely wrong. I took care of the animals as fast as I could, and I got out of there. Whatever was in the sheep pasture was truly watching or tracking me with interest. I saw the head turn. I saw the head follow me. So she told, her husband about it because he wouldn't find her crazy, and she told me because obviously I wouldn't find her crazy because I lived across from them. I've experienced plenty. You've been on that property. We've experienced things together. One of the things that I found probably most relatable to this that was very creepy is the one night my oldest daughter, is when we only had her, she was in a car seat like a carrier. She was really little. We came home, it was probably around midnight, between midnight and 1 a.m. We pulled into the parking lot, and we had a porch light at the house that was in like that old 70s amber glass, light fixture. So it was just like a brownie yellow light that only illuminated maybe a 15 to 20 foot radius around the porch. I mean, you couldn't see jack squat. That it was a very weak disbursement of light because of that lampshade or cover, whatever you want to call it. So we're coming out of the car and we're walking towards the house, and about, I don't know, what'd you say, 25 yards was that chestnut tree, the big tree that was in the middle of the yard?
Yeah.
I'd say about 25 yards.
Yeah, about 25.
So we hear just this super, just odd whistle. And the only time I heard somebody replicate it that was like spot on was Tom Seawood. Yep. When we interviewed Tom Seawood, so you guys could go back and listen to that. He made this whistling where he kind of like put his fingers in his mouth and whistled and wiggled his fingers back and forth. It was like I can't replicate it, but it was just this weird, high-pitched, fluttery. I can't do it. It was sort of kind of like that, but really loud. And it just, all it was is just this sound coming from the darkness, but you could tell it was coming from that tree. So whether it was in the tree, behind the tree, near the tree, I don't know. You could just vaguely make out the leaves and stuff on the tree. It was super loud. I mean, obviously audio is always amplified at night because you don't have the normal noise pollution that you would have of things going on during the day. So it was super loud. It happened like 2 or 3 times, and we just scurried right into the house like as fast as we could. We got the hell out of there. But it was almost like something was trying to garner our attention and call us out. Or it was warning us. I don't know. But I mean, that was one of the many bizarre things that had happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. The old farmhouse and that whole valley is. I used to have to drive through there coming home from work, and it was always just the weirdest. Like, you would enter into the valley and you would just get this weird, like, almost like I would be exhausted. I'd be dead tired, and I'd get there and be wide awake. Like, some kind of weird energy just like would kick up, like, and you would just be like driving with your window, like, even in the, like, you might have driven the whole way with the windows down. All of a sudden you got there and you put the windows up, you turn the high beams on, and you like grab the steering wheel and just look straight forward. And then every so often you like look out the corner of your eyes, like either side of you.
Yep.
And
you always feel like you have to look over your shoulder. Like it's just weird.
Yep. Yeah. And definitely out there at the house, like, we would come out to see you guys and we'd be sitting out there in middle of the day, it'd be beautiful, and birds chirping, like just the mountain behind you is the fields, all that stuff around the house. And as it would start getting dark, you would just notice like the animals would disperse, and it would get really like eerie. I mean, times that you and I hiked out there at night and stuff like that, and you would, you'd be hiking and you'd hear like you'd be walking like, and one time we hiked out with snowshoes on to set bait out and cameras, and you'd be like walking, and all of a sudden you'd just like stop, and you'd swear you heard something else crunching just a little bit behind you. But
well, remember that time we had like 32 inches of snow, and we're out there without the snowshoes, trucking through that. Oh God, that was a workout. But that was that. I think that was the time when we experienced that, for lack of better terms, almost like that infrasound effect, where there was that noise because remember there was ice on the pond, and we thought it was coming from under the ice, but it was actually coming from beyond the pond. It was like that low resonating. Just and you felt like you had to run. I felt like I was gonna like fall over. I got really dizzy, and I just felt like I had to sit down. And you felt that fight or flight. I don't know. That whole area. I mean, I have other stories that I heard from other people, like I said, that live in neighboring farms. Footprints, sounds, noises, physical figures or beings or whatever you want to call it, like people would see, walking around and whatnot. I've recorded noises, which is actually on our website. It's the Sasquatch sound. It was recorded at the farm. Tons of different shit. We saw the peaker the one time. Remember when we were out, there was a meadow deep in the forest. I don't want to say deep, but it was back in the forest behind the house that we lived in. Chad and I went out one night investigating, and it was probably like, I don't know, 1 or 2 in the morning.
Around there.
Yeah. And we had a call blaster, and we were playing, whatever sounds we were able to download from the internet, like the Sierra sounds and all that kind of shit, like all the Ohio howls and all that. So we were just blasting stuff out there, babies crying and all that stuff. And down at the far end of the meadow, which was easily 150 yards. I mean, it was beyond a football field. There was something. Now, it was a full moon. We tried to make sure that when we went out, it was a full moon. So it was lit up pretty damn well. But down the tree line on the edge of the meadow, there was something that would just kind of like pop out of the trees in the shadows and kind of like look up towards us as we're playing these sounds. Then when we would step out and look down, it would pop back. Then we'd kind of step back a little bit into the shadows, and then it would pop back out. And like it was almost like playing, peekaboo with us or tag, or you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm out. No, you're out. No, I'm out. You're out. I don't know. Couldn't make out any detail. I don't know. Were you able to?
I mean, just big.
Yeah, but I mean, more of just like the outline.
Yeah, it wasn't like feature or anything like that. It was just big, and I could tell there was something there, because it would be there, and then you would see that mass move. Yeah.
And I don't remember wind. Like, I don't think it was a tree branch coming out.
To me, it would have been too large and too broad to be like a tree branch
coming out like from down below, not like a tree branch bobbing down. You know what I mean? It was coming like up from the ground. It was
just, if this was the tree, it was going.
Yeah.
And then just melt itself back over.
Yeah, almost like it was like kind of hanging and leaning out from the. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I also saw that, to me, still to this day, a set of legs crossing that opening.
I remember, which was the same pond that we experienced the sound.
Yeah.
And it was earlier that night, wasn't it? Because I remember you when we finally got back to the back area of the pond where it goes to the trail through the woods. I remember you saying, I swear I just saw something trailing us.
That was after the sound, because we had come back between the two ponds, and there was just a little bit of an opening through the woods,
Yeah.
And I saw two, I mean, massive legs just walk across it.
Yeah, I remember that, and I think that's what added to your flight for the fight or flight thing, because you saw it, I didn't.
Yeah.
I just felt that resonance, and I'm like, "Ooh, I got to sit down." I got really, really dizzy. But I don't know. So point being is there's some weird things out there, and I definitely want to get back out there. That property, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the areas that Chad and I have talked about many times throughout the show, and we've done lots of research, and we actually want to get back out there and do a test with the cameras, because what we had found the last time we put cameras out, we had them out there for about 3 months. And what we found very interesting is the small pond, I had found like 52-inch carp that were plucked out. I mean, these are massive fish. They were plucked out, and a semicircular bite was taken out of the lower area where the roe or the egg sacs would be. And I mean, it was like if you take a bite out of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and they have that semicircular human-like bite was taken out. And there are pictures. If you go to our Facebook, actually it's Sasquatch ATV research team on Facebook, we have the pictures out there. I don't think we have it on Xplorers, but I'll try and put them out there. I have pictures of these fish. It looked like as if you would take a bite out of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It was taken out of the fish. So I put a camera trap up where these fish were left. There was 2 of them left in the same exact spot. And then there was a large koi in the larger pond that I had found like a year or 2 later. Same semicircular bite taken out of it, and the rest of the body was left. And it was all around the end of winter, interestingly enough. I found a massive scat that was very human looking, but it was a giant log of blueberries. So it was like a giant blueberry shit, undigested. It looked like a human turd that was all blueberries. So I don't know. And again, this was right in the tail end of winter. Nothing was bloomed, nothing was growing. So where that blueberry turd came from, I don't know. Something must have been storing it. But anyway, we put the one camera by the small pond, which was closer to the house. It picked up pictures and videos throughout the entire 3 months it was there. And this was from winter into early spring. The other 2 cameras, one was down by this meadow that we were talking about. And the other one was back further near a foundation of a home that is rumored to have been the foundation of a home that belonged to 3 sisters that lived back there. They were accused of witchcraft, but that's a whole other story. But there was a deer carcass back there that a hunter left, and I put the camera trap up near that. And the funny thing is, those 2 cameras, I had taken them home after the fact, tested them. They still work to this day. But ironically, it was actually, I think it was Christmas Eve or around Christmas when these videos took place. They both fired, got about 18 seconds out of 180 seconds of the video. They cut to black, and it was just nothing for the rest of the video. Same day, same time. Neither one of them picked up any video or pictures thereafter, but the one near the house continued to work. I brought all the cameras home, tested them all again. They all worked perfectly fine, nothing wrong with them. But the 2 cameras that were deeper into the forest, into the hot spot that Chad and I call it, both stopped within an hour of each other. Same date, same time. Like they were just off by minutes.
Yeah.
How do you explain that? You know what I mean? It's an area of high strangeness. I would not be surprised, dude, if we go out there again and we find petroglyphs of some sort.
I
You know
wouldn't
what I mean?
doubt it,
'Cause
'cause
areas... Go ahead.
well, like that stone circle where I found that other print.
Yeah.
When we went to look at where you were taking me out to show me where the first one was, I found that like that stone circle that's back in there.
Yep.
That almost looks purposely placed.
It has to be. It's a perfect circle.
Yeah.
And that was also the area
doubt.
where those... Yeah, I wouldn't doubt we would find petroglyphs there or something. And that was also the area where those pine trees were, where we found all those like dead turkeys. Remember?
Yep.
I don't know. So, but anyways, that pretty much wraps up the show. Those are our personal stories from neighbors and ourselves and whatnot. And that was the breakdown of the Wendigo, however you want to pronounce it. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I truly do apologize for not being able to communicate with you guys. I've been trying to flick back and forth between Facebook and whatnot, but I didn't want the video to play on Facebook and then while we were actually recording it and have some sort of a funky delay or audio interference. But I hope you enjoyed the topic tonight. I was really looking forward to this one because I just love the story of the Wendigo and any kind of Native American lore. I love that stuff. But yeah, I want to thank you, Chad, for tuning in and hanging out as always and helping out with the show. And everybody, again, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sorry you couldn't comment. I really wanted to interact with you guys tonight. I was so looking forward to it, but alas, technical difficulties. But as I said twice before, you could join us every other Tuesday on Facebook or YouTube live. Comment underneath the shows, and hopefully we will see your comments live and we could interact like we normally do on any given other Tuesday. While you're there, follow us on Facebook, like and subscribe on YouTube, hit the bell for notifications or whatever the hell you do on YouTube. You can follow us on or listen to us on any of the big podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon Music. And while you are there, give us a 5-star review. We got to get boosted up in these algorithms to try and boost the show. But other than that, again, thank you everybody for tuning in. Chad, thank you for hanging out as always. And we will see you guys in 2 weeks. Chad, do you want to give a breakdown on what the next show topic is, or do you want a surprise?
No, I actually just posted it in the comments in our video. We're gonna next episode. We're going to talk about the high strangeness of the Hudson River Valley in New York State. There's anything from a river monster, the headless horseman, the only house that has been legally deemed haunted in New York State, and several other strange stories and folklore of the area that we'll be talking about.
I'm really looking forward to that one. That's one. Sleepy Hollow is one of the areas that you and I have always talked about going to. So,
yeah,
hopefully,
just the two of us bed and breakfast.
Absolutely. One room, one bed.
Yeah,
two boys. But anyways, I really want to go up there. Hopefully, this summer we could actually get up there and check it out, because that's one place that we've always talked about going to. So I'm looking forward to this next show because there is a lot of lore and legend up there for us to talk about. So it's going to be a good one. So tune in 2 weeks from now, which that will be on the 25th of June, Tuesday the 25th. Again, thank you everybody for tuning in. Chad, thanks for being here as always, my friend, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks. Good night, everybody.
Night, everybody.